This is Fight Fans Radio.
Let's get ready to rumble! Oh my God! Unbelievable! Down goes Frazier! Down goes Frazier! It's time!
You're listening to New Mexico's only mixed martial arts and boxing podcast, The Low Blow, on AdamCombatSports.com and Fight Fans Radio. And yes, welcome to the first ever live edition of LowBlow Radio on US Combat Sports, SouthwestFight.com, and Fight Fans Radio. I am Justin Goodrum, joined by Jorge Hernandez and Will McClary. What's up, guys?
What's up, Jay?
What's going on? What a crazy day. The sky is falling. The sky is falling, Justin.
It is. What a day for us to go live. I mean, I had a little bit of trouble finding news stories, and when I wake up looking at Twitter, it's just the whole MMA landscape just went into a black hole, and it's just been pretty much a panic this entire day. So we're going to try to, as best as we can, give you a clear picture of what's going down today. So we're going to discuss all the crazy happenings going on with Zuffa, with the cancellation of UFC 151. We're going to break down Dana White's decision of why he canceled a UFC event for the first time ever. We're also going to talk about what's supposed to be big news, but is now overshadowed from this UFC situation. K-1 headed to Spike TV. We're going to break down a fantastic Strikeforce event featuring Ronda Rousey and the future of women's MMA, and talk about Carlos Condit training with Austin Trout over the weekend. As always, you can contact us through Facebook, through facebook.com/LowBlow podcast. We got to change that to radio, but for now, just type in LowBlow and you'll find us under the Facebook search. Also through Twitter, through at the LowBlow, and through email through lowblow505@gmail.com, and we're available to Stitcher and iTunes. So before we get into it, guys, I want to give a little bit of history on our show. We cover mixed martial arts and boxing in the New Mexico area. As we all know, living in New Mexico is not really a lot to do, but I think what we're known as a state is pretty much green chili, global basketball, and fighting. Pretty much the state's had a tradition of boxing history going back for a very long time. And in recent years, in particular the last 10 years, mixed martial arts has really picked up in this area. So all three of us are college buddies. We met up in college just loving both sports. And we felt it was kind of a duty to kind of expose the sport to as many people as possible because it wasn't getting their exposure on local radio or on television. So we try to do our part to give you listeners just an insight as to the great talent we have in New Mexico. So let's get into it with the Standing 8 Counts, a new segment that we're doing. It's the top 8 stories that we think are important in our neck of the woods concerning MMA and boxing. So let's break down this whole UFC 151 debacle. It pretty much all started last night. I was just surfing the net last night and found a story about Dan Henderson tweaking his knee. Twitter blew up. There was a picture of Dan Henderson in a brace, claiming that there was some kind of knee injury going on. But according to this tweet by Dan Henderson, it was, quote, headed to the house to get some work done by MS Mariah V. I guess she's a massage therapist, to finish the day happy. So everybody assumed everything was fine. I didn't really take the story too seriously because nothing was confirmed. This was last night, so certainly I wasn't really too freaked out about any kind of Dan Henderson knee injury. I just kind of hoped it would just go away. But I guess my prayers weren't answered. You wake up the next day, you read Twitter, and you find out UFC 151 was canceled. Just really a huge disaster. And I want to toss it to some audio from the conference call that happened earlier today. The entire 30-minute interview is on the UFC website. I totally recommend just listening to it just for entertainment reasons, because Dana White just totally loses his mind, and because it has a lot of good information and a lot of good questions from the best journalists in MMA. So we can toss it to that audio now. Here's Dana White explaining why UFC 151 was canceled.
So this is probably one of my all-time lows as being president of the UFC over the last 11 years. For the first time in 11 years, we're going to cancel an event. This Saturday's fight at Mandalay Bay is being canceled. Dan Henderson has a partial tear in his MCL and couldn't continue. He tried to train. He tried to continue to work out. He saw doctors, and there was nothing we could do to save that fight. So one of the things that you guys have heard me brag about a million times is how UFC doesn't have to cancel events. We can, we can always find a replacement. For somebody to fight John Jones on 8 days' notice is tough to do. But to be totally honest with you guys, one guy did, not only when I called him did he say, I'll take the fight, he said, I'll fly to Las Vegas tonight and fight him. And that was Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen accepted the fight with John Jones, wanted the fight bad. So as of, 8, 9 o'clock last night, we had a fight. We here at the UFC started working, creating different commercials. PR started getting ready to crank up. I was going to do this call, and this was obviously going to be a much different call this morning. But the one thing that I never thought in a million years would happen happened. John Jones said, I'm not fighting Chael Sonnen with 8 days' notice. Again, something that's never happened in UFC history. A guy who's a world champion and considered one of the pound-for-pound best turns down a fight. So that has never happened either. So right now what's happening is this fight is canceled, and we're moving. It'll be John Jones versus Lyoto Machida Saturday, September 22nd on the Toronto, Canada card at UFC 152.
Just an unbelievable situation played out. As you heard in the conference call, it was stated that Chael Sonnen stepped up, accepted the fight. It was kind of amazing because they automatically assumed that John Jones would say yes without asking him if he would take the fight against Chael Sonnen. So the UFC put together the PR, the commercials, all the typical UFC. The hype machine was going, but they didn't talk to John Jones first. As you heard Dana White said, John Jones declined the fight. Basically, from the John Jones perspective, Jones talked with his camp, Greg Jackson, Winkle John, etc., and Greg Jackson, along with the entire Jackson's camp, declined the fight. And Dana White was not too happy, claiming that Greg Jackson is a effing sport killer. That is a natural quote. That is not me using hyperbole. He actually said that. So Dana White is truly upset, really angry, and we're going to break down this entire story, give our opinions later on with our main topics. But Jorge has an interesting story about another Jackson's fighter. I guess he's former Jackson's fighter now. Go ahead, Jorge.
Yeah, former Jackson's fighter here, Willie Parks. U.S. Marshals are apparently looking for this guy for what they say is he's being accused of battering his girlfriend. According to a warrant filed by the Bernalillo County Metropolitan Court here, which is obviously the county Albuquerque, is located in, July 29th. Willie Parks became involved in an altercation with his girlfriend and apparently battered her. She sustained a concussion and even a broken nose. The police report said that the victim's prenatal test showed that she would, eventually miscarry the baby as a result of the injuries. She was with Willie's child at the time, and now he kept her from even going to the hospital. On August 2nd, the victim ended up going to the hospital. A warrant for Parks' arrest was issued a couple of weeks ago, and U.S. Marshals have yet to find him. They believe he might be in New Mexico, especially out in the eastern area of the metropolitan area here in Albuquerque, in Edgewood. It's a town about 20, 30 miles just east of here. And he also has connections to Garden Grove, California. So with anyone with any information, just for his safety, there is a phone number that you could call for the Marshal Services. This guy's number is the Marshal Service District phone number is 505-346-6400. We hope the guy's all right and that he does report himself or he's eventually found, because this guy has had a really tumultuous couple of months here. He was supposed to be on the next Tough series with the UFC. According to sources, He may have failed a drug test of some sort. He was then followed that test. He got kicked out of the UFC. So, or excuse me, got kicked out of Jackson's gym. So really, really interesting information there. Now, going to toss it over to Will, who has even more news here out of the local area.
Well, Albuquerque's been patiently awaiting the autopsy from the famous boxer Johnny Tapia, and it turns out that his wife has confirmed that he did not die from a drug overdose. It was actually from a heart disease and high blood pressure. That the autopsy is also saying that it's likely from the many tattoos that the boxer had, and probably stemmed from hepatitis C. So she released to the press today that she was doing it to dispel all myths that her husband had actually died from a drug overdose. He had, recently struggled with cocaine abuse, but it was a beautiful thing, great example to see a woman standing by her man to the end and honoring his name even after being parted by death. So Johnny Tapia is cleared from the drug overdose, dispel all those myths, and it's just phenomenal what he was able to overcome, and it's great to see his family still stand by him and just get that cleared up.
Absolutely. It also, some interesting news out of K-1 broke earlier this week. It was going to be our main story before all the UFC 151 craziness happened. K-1 has signed a deal to bring their action to U.S. homes and to bring it to broadcast television to Spike Television. They signed an agreement for all K-1 shows to be shown in U.S. The 4 remaining shows that K-1 has in 2012 will be shown on Spike.com. There's one September 8th in Los Angeles, one in Tokyo, Japan, October 14th, one December 8th in Athens, Greece, and another event in December 26th in New York. So that goes along with the crazy UFC schedule. So I think about 8 events. I mean, that's not even counting Bellator or Strikeforce. That's going to be a insane month. So certainly, along with, basketball has their traditional Christmas Day game. I mean, it's going to be an insane month of sports. Spike TV is going to have their website cover all these K1 events. This is unprecedented. They're going to have live streaming of the weigh-ins before the bouts, locker room interviews, and live coverage of every fight on the card. I know myself and Jorge, we talk K1 occasionally. I think it's just great to see kickboxing actually get a shot in the United States. And we'll see what happens. I think Spike TV pushing the UFC previously successfully. I think with this deal with K1 and with Bellator on board, bright things are in the future for both those organizations.
A little more boxing here. Carl Froch, who as of right now has the performance of the year in boxing by dethroning former IBF super middleweight Lucien Boutet, has apparently announced a fight for November 17th in Nottingham, England. It's supposed to be a tune-up fight, but they have no opponent to tune up against. Mikhail Kessler is out. Kelly Pavlik is probably more than likely out, even though Kelly wants a fight of this caliber, but I don't think he's ready yet, and I think his management knows that as well. A couple of prospects that they're thinking of putting against him are actually fighting one another. Donis Stevenson and Don George, they're actually fighting October 13 in Montreal. And Froch is now going to announce his opponent, hopefully within the next week or so. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. Again, Carl Froch probably entered the top 10 pound for pound again after that performance he did have against Lucien Boutet.
Apparently, it's just been a bad week for Jackson's MMA, and I guess people want to pile on. It basically started at the Strikeforce event where there was a bunch of Jackson's MMA fighters in action. The score total, I think Jackson's went 1-4, even though Cesar Gracie said they went 0-3. They had 4 fighters on the card. They went 1-4, and I think a feud started going on Twitter, and particularly Cesar Gracie had this tweet. Cali, since a certain team from New Mexico, home winless, 0-3, Dancing with the Stars, don't cut it here. And then Jackson's MMA had a retweet to that. Their quote was, "There was some confusion that we went 0-3 last night. Bad night at work. For those of you that cannot count, Aden Anagov did get the win. #math." So that was the missing win for Jackson's MMA. But this kind of beef between Cesar Gracie and Greg Jackson has been going on for the last couple of years now. In particular, got spotlighted by the Carlos Condit Nick Diaz fight. I think Gracie's always not really had a warm spot for Greg Jackson, and it looks like that's continuing on Twitter. And now we're going to toss it over to the results of the Strikeforce card with Rousey versus Kaufman. Will has those.
Absolutely. So we'll start off with Misha Tate, who was looking kind of crazy eating that ice cream in the in the crowd. I have to say, I was wondering what was going on. But anyway, she did defeat Julie Kadesi via submission by armbar in the third round at 3 minutes and 28 seconds. We also had Dallin Imagov defeat Keith Berry via TKO. Landing the strikes round 1 in 48 seconds. Very impressive there. We also had Jermaine Randaman defeat Hirako Yamanaki, butchering the name, excuse me for that, via unanimous decision. All three judges had it 30-27. Bobby Green also defeated Matt Righthouse via unanimous decision. All judges there also had it 30-27. And John Luzon defeated Gray Maynard, got on the war on the New Year's Eve. The source, MMAweekly.com.
Yeah, they're going to fight New Year's Eve. It's going to be a great fight, especially for both those guys. Gray Maynard is coming off that epic fights with Frankie Edgar. And, it's interesting because Gray Maynard is considered usually a boring fighter in the UFC. But really, the tables were turned when he fought Clay Guida in that fight earlier this year. Clay Guida was running a lot, and everybody called Clay Guida the boring fighter, even though Guida has more fight of the nights than anybody. Gray Maynard kind of pretty much became the hero, and now he'll go against Joe Lozon, who picked up a huge victory fairly recently, and that's going to go on New Year's Eve. And also, I just want to give some of these results from the main card of Strikeforce. We had Jacare Souza defeating Derek Brunson in round 1. My prediction came true. Pretty much knocked out Brunson big time. That sets up a matchup between himself and Luke Rockhold later on. You also had Tariq Safadine defeat Roger Bowling, 30-27, 30-27, 30-27. You had Anthony Smith defeat Lubumba Sayers via submission triangle choke, round 1, 352. And Ovin St. Preux, OSP, defeat TJ Cook via knockout in round 3. And in the main event, of course, you saw Ronda Rousey totally ruined my prediction and made me look like a fool, armbarring Sarah Kaufman in round 1 in 54 seconds. She retains the bantamweight title. So I think, guys, now we're going to go 3 rounds. It's another new segment, which myself, Will, and Jorge, for about a minute or so, will kind of give a final burn on what's kind of irritating us or what's got our eye in the world of mixed martial arts and boxing. So, Will, if you want to take it away.
Yeah, well, Ricky Hatton has always irritated me by being overrated, but regardless of that, he is trying to make a comeback. It isn't official yet, but they said, he's established himself as a pretty decent trainer, and he's been staying in shape. Now, you know that he has went on pretty much a 3-year hiatus after suffering a brutal defeat from Manny Pacquiao in 2009. Really just did something to his confidence, as it should. That was a crazy knockout. But he's rumored to come back against Paulie Malignaggi, who he has already fought in 2008, and he was victorious against Malignaggi. But Malignaggi coming off a huge win, it may be interesting. So we'll have to wait and see if we actually do get that comeback. Another fighter who's returning to the ring is Andre Berto, who was recently caught he tested positive for steroid in May, and he canceled his huge fight with Victor Ortiz, and fight fans have been awaiting to see what Andre Berto is going to do. So he definitely got licensed by the California State Athletic Commission on Tuesday, but we don't know which opponent he is going to fight. A very talented fighter. Hope he can stay clean and get a great matchup. We also have news in terms of Manny Pacquiao returning from the ring. Also, we cannot confirm who his next opponent is going to be, but we do know that he was supposed to initially fight on November 1st, but now he'll be fighting on December 1st. And last but certainly not least, we also have Alfredo Angulo, who was recently just released from 8 months within an immigration detention center, and we also don't know who he's coming back. Now, we know he suffered a defeat by the hands of James Kirtland. Kirtland's been having some problems with getting some good matchups and, really just continuing he's continued his winning streak, but not in an impressive fashion. So I don't know the possibility of the rematch there, but definitely some great fighters making a return, regardless of their popularity and some of their problems that they had in the sport. It'd be interesting to see if they can make some big comebacks.
And apparently he has one hell of a mullet now that he's out of that immigration detention center. So I don't know, someone might have to fade him up with those clippers before he gets in the ring, man.
Yeah, he's got that Joe Dirt.
But a little something here from my end. It's just something that's really, especially with what happened with Willie lately, is just who is responsible on checking the state of the mind of these fighters. Is it their camp? Is it the promotion they're actually signed to? Just because of recently what we've seen with not just Willie, but Mayhem also. Who or what, who is responsible for them? Who's responsible for checking these guys out? Obviously, you want to stop them before they do something crazy. Whether it be an illness or whether it just be someone snapping, it was a chain of events that eventually led up to what, Willie Parks, did. I'm making no excuse. You should never put your hands on a woman. But this guy, he got let go by the Tough Series. Then he got let go by the Jackson's camp. And then we see this. Who is responsible for these guys? And more than likely, I think it should be their management or the gym they actually train at to actually keep an eye out on these guys. So that's something, just a little food for thought when it does come to that.
Yeah, and what about the UFC too? We're not UFC, but just if they do make it to that major league level, in particular in Mayhem's case, even though he got released, certainly, with the NFL, when players get concussions, or if there's a major death or something like that, they're able to talk to somebody or seek some kind of counseling to help them go through whatever they're going through. So I think, when they don't have that organization supporting them, it's kind of hard. But hopefully we see more MMA camps. So they got the money now. Jackson's is so world-renowned, Extreme Couture, AKA, etc. I think they got the funds to do that. So I think you're right, Jorge. My, final burn is pretty much about women's MMA. I'm kind of sick of Dana White saying he doesn't think women's MMA doesn't have a future in the UFC because he knows nothing about women's MMA. It was just hilarious, just him talking about watching Misha Tate and Julie Kedzie fight and saying I think he sent out a tweet saying, now I know who Julie Kedzie is. It's like Julie Kedzie's been around for years. She was in the fight with Gina Carano that pretty much put women's mixed martial arts on the map. So it is dumbfounding to me as to why Dana White thinks he has a great opinion on women's MMA. It truly does not make any sense to me. But I just think the future of women's MMA is bright if you have the right people doing it. And I think, in particular, the people running Invicta Fighting Championships has the right things going on. And I think, the UFC has bought the WEC, they bought WFA, they bought all these organizations. I don't see why they couldn't buy Invicta and just have those people running it run the women's division. I just think since Dana White's so busy, you have Lorenzo Fertitta so busy, Joe Silva busy, having this camp that runs only women's MMA employed by Zuffa inside the UFC, I think would help women's MMA big time instead of Dana White worrying about it so much. So hopefully Dana White just doesn't talk about women's MMA anymore and just says Ronda Rousey's awesome and just moves on, because anytime he has any kind of opinion on women's MMA going into the UFC, it just sounds terrible. So hopefully he just lays off of that. So guys, let's get into our main topics, and particularly UFC 151, the fallout. And I want to break down these questions to you. Number one, about Jon Jones's image. Is he officially the bad guy, the main villain in the UFC? We saw, a huge change in how people view Jon Jones once he destroyed Shogun for the title. And you saw his personality change and just things that turns people off from, once loving Jon Jones to hating him. Now you have this circumstance with Jones turning down Chael Sonnen and electing to wait to fight Lyoto Machida. Do you think Jon Jones is now officially a villain in the UFC, and could that be a benefit to him down the line?
He's the bad guy. He's, I guess, the Floyd Mayweather of boxing, and he's a pretty polarizing figure when it does come to it. And it's unfortunate because I think, the guy was thrown under the bus. The UFC prides himself in having these strong cards, but when the proverbial crap hits the fan, what are you going to do? And they found a scapegoat, and they blamed it on Jon Jones, and they blamed it on Greg Jackson, and I thought that was completely unprofessional. But when has he ever been too professional?
That's true.
In the actual definition of Dana White I'm actually referring to. And people love him. Dana White is the complete opposite of Bob Arum or a Don King. This guy puts fighters against each other that people would like to see. But in this situation, I think he's 100% wrong the way he's approaching the Jackson camp and John Jones. It's not John Jones' fault that the card wasn't strong enough to have him pulled out. If you ask if he's the best fighter in this sport, and it's unfortunate that this has happened to him, he was just put in a really tough situation today for all of a sudden for this guy, 20 pounds less than you to come up and challenge you for your title. I would take that as a sign of disrespect. He's all, do you think this guy who hasn't fought in this weight for how long, and you think he can challenge me? He's all, when I've defeated the top 4 guys in this division, and you've said yourself that these other guys are the number 1 contenders. So basically, that was disrespectful to the top 5 ranked guys for that belt, I think, as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So, along with John Jones, as you said, Jorge, Greg Jackson seems to be, if you want to go do a Star Wars reference, he's kind of, there's Darth Vader to, the other bad guy. I forgot what his name is. I don't know. I'm not a Star Wars geek, but you know what I mean. That, the hooded dude is kind of like, you have Darth Vader, and then you have a puppet controlling the strings. So it seems like Greg Jackson's kind of, people are labeling him as the puppet master, as controlling John Jones's thinking process. So why is Greg Jackson getting such a bad rap for this? Do you think it's because, his fighters has been putting some questionable performances in terms of excitement? I mean, Clay Guida gotten criticism. George St. Pierre's gotten criticism. Even John Jones got some criticism against his fight against Rashad Evans, and of course Carlos Condit. So, what do you think about Greg Jackson becoming this villain? Even though, for years he's been considered the nicest guy in the sport.
So basically, what I heard from today's announcement when I was listening to the conference call earlier, Dana White claims that the quote from Greg Jackson to John Jones was something like, "Don't take this fight. This will be the worst mistake of your career." In a way, it would be, just because he has everything to lose if for some reason he did lose that fight. But in a way, I guess you could see kind of compare Dana and Bob Arum with Top Rank, just because of of them quoting people. Wasn't it just a couple of weeks ago that Dana White said that Nike was dropping Manny, and that turns out not to be the case at all?
Correct.
So it's
Correct.
pretty funny that he's just misquoting these people, and I want to know what that conversation between Greg and Jones was like. It probably was. It wasn't a wise decision, and if he did say that, I wouldn't be surprised. But for Greg Jackson to be receiving this, he's not the guys' manager. He's not their promoter. He's their coach. But you do trust your coach more than any other person. And if he did tell him that, it was the right decision, I thought, and the right thing to tell John Jones. But for him to be blamed for all these performances, look at all these other fighters that have done well. Carlos Condit caught a lot of slack because of his last performance, but nobody remembers that he has probably the highest finishing ratio in MMA history. Probably.
Jorge, no one cares because they think he's boring. They think it's boring.
Well, did they think it was boring when he landed that knee? Or
I think his personality's boring. That's
he is a boring individual. But for Greg Jackson to be blamed, man, come on.
It's ridiculous. I agree with you. Totally.
He's not in the octagon. He's not these guys' promoter or managers. He was just a friend there for John Jones, and it just turns out that it's one of the most trusted men. So for Greg Jackson to get cut this, for people to jump on him, and for Dana to do the way he did, I found it very interesting, and I was flabbergasted by it, man.
Yeah, I agree, and I think what I heard is it was a team decision with Greg Jackson. The whole Jackson's team had an input, and then they made the decision collectively as a team, and John Jones went from there. So this is a very interesting situation. I'm sure it's not over, but I think when September 22nd rolls around, they still got to promote John Jones. As a commodity. He's the main event for now a huge mega show in Toronto featuring 2 title fights. So even though they might hate John Jones's guts today, for the next 3-4 weeks, they have to promote John Jones like he's the greatest star in the sport. They have to. They're pushing this event pretty much all on him. No offense to the flyweights, and I like the division, but no one knows who Demetrius Johnson and Joseph Benavidez are unless you're a super hardcore MMA fan. None of my friends, I mean, if you watch the promos for UFC, they're going to wonder why are there two midgets fighting in the octagon. I mean, honestly, I mean, that's a horrible statement. And it would make any hardcore MMA fan angry, but that's the truth because they haven't been promoted correctly. So, in my mind, I just think, Dana White is a very emotional person. He gets angry a lot, and I just think cooler heads will prevail. And in 2 weeks' time, everything will be cool. And Dana White was out. I said some things out of anger. I apologize, and he'll just promote John Jones like it's any day of the week.
Yeah, very quick question for you guys.
Sure.
When it comes to this sport, it's because it's still growing in the mainstream. So if you're a mainstream fan and the two names you know are Anderson Silva and John Jones just signed a worldwide deal with him on Nike. How does that look that the runner of this organization was bashing on the best fighter? You know what I mean? It's unreal. I mean, it's unheard of.
Looks terrible. It does. But yeah, at the same time, Dana White won't be held accountable until the sport is mainstream. I mean, look at his comments with Loretta Hunt, his kind of tirade on her, his tirade on MMA journalists, the whole gay slur thing. He really wasn't taken to task in terms of mainstream media. I mean, GLAAD did. I mean, organizations kind of took care of that. But in terms of ESPN, in terms of, national coverage, I mean, Dana White kind of got a pass. So I think him kind of slamming John Jones, I don't really think is too big of a deal now since the sport is still not mainstream. I mean, I saw it. It was on SportsCenter about Chael Sonnen, about his participation in UFC 151. He was on there doing an interview. There was no mention of Dana White slamming John Jones at all. There's no audio from the conference call. And there was some quotable stuff, some very funny stuff you'd think that makes SportsCenter. I mean, Roger Goodell or any other commissioner for any other major sports said that'd be, first thing leading off SportsCenter. But because it's Dana White, UFC's not mainstream, they think Chael Sonnen is the bigger soundbite. Chael Sonnen gets the attention, and Dana White's comments kind of go under the rug. So,
but you think we would have had the same result and the same reaction with any other MMA superstar that refused to take a fight? Would we got the same reaction? That's the real question: is how John Jones is being singled out and why he's being singled out.
It depends. That's a very good question, Will. I think it was like a George St. Pierre or somebody with some better goodwill in the sport. I think they would have gotten a little bit of a pass, but I think it's because of John Jones that there's so much ill will. I mean, I was watching this MMA chat today, and they were talking about this John Jones, his image from people loving him to people hating him. I mean, that's already happened. So when you have all this negative energy towards a person, and then this happens, I mean, your natural instinct is to automatically go after them. And it's interesting because many people said Henderson was going to get killed by John Jones anyway. Mm-hmm. And many people say that the Lyoto Machida John Jones matchup is way more interesting in terms of a style matchup. I mean, Machida didn't win a round. So you would think people would be kind of happy about this in a way because a lot of people said Dan Henderson's going to get destroyed. No, I wasn't thinking that. I was going to pick John Jones, but I thought Dan Henderson had a decent shot at winning. I don't know if I was in the minority about that, but a lot of people pretty much had Dan Henderson having zero chance of winning. So the fight's been changed. So you think there'd be a lot of people happy, like, oh, okay, this is more of a competitive matchup. Even though it's a rematch, we're seeing the number one contender in the Lyoto Machida immediately get a title shot. And instead, you're seeing all these people get super angry about giving a title shot to a guy who just lost his title shot to Anderson Silva, and like you said, Jorge, is a weight class below. It's ridiculous. Let's move on to the Strikeforce event. We were supposed to talk about this pretty much in our first main point, but UFC 151 again kind of took the thunder from that. I want to talk about Ronda Rousey. Absolutely annihilated Sarah Kaufman. As I said in the beginning, I picked Sarah Kaufman to win this fight, and boy, I was wrong. This unbelievable performance by Ronda Rousey. But can she become a mainstream star considering not only her attitude and the division, but the way she's winning? I mean, you would never see, I don't think even a championship level boxer. I mean, even if we talked about this before. If Floyd Mayweather or Miguel Cotto or Pacquiao or anybody went into MMA, and Pacquiao, I don't think we see any of these championship boxers win every single one of their MMA fights by like a right hand every single time. Like that's insane. That would never happen.
I'm picturing little Mikey from Mike Tyson's Punch Out with that super punch, man. When you say that,
freaking little Mac, man.
Yeah,
I mean that fight reminded me of when I saw that Ronda Rousey fight. It just reminded me of when they had that travesty of James Toney charging at Randy Couture and he got him over with quick. That's his trade. That's his specialty. And yeah, I don't know. I mean, I want to talk about her attitude a little bit. Like right before the interview, right before the fight, it was just kind of really weird. She didn't seem like she really wanted to engage in the conversation. I know fighters get focused on the fight. They don't have many words to share. But it's just really off. It's just really kind of capricious behavior that she shows. In terms of being a well-rounded fighter, I was really pretty disappointed in Sarah Kaufman. I mean, she knew that was Ronda Rousey's specialty, was that armbar. So was it just so good? I mean, obviously it was so good that she got her out of there, but it seemed like she just couldn't do anything against her. So if she does get this fight, with Chris Cyborg, she calls out Chris Cyborg, she gets clean, she comes back to the cage, and she's got tremendous power. It's really unfortunate, of course, for the steroids, but I think she still has tremendous natural power. Do you think power will, overpower a one-dimensional fighter like Ronda Rousey, who has, this spectacular armbar?
That's going to be interesting to see, I think. Who knows? I mean, if you keep it standing, because we haven't really seen Rousey in trouble standing up. We don't know how good her stand-up is. She trains with a lot of boxers, man. A lot of guys a lot of prospects coming out of that gym that she's actually at. So it'd be very interesting to see how she is just standing up when she is in trouble and unable to take one of the other fighters down. That's the key. I mean, you got to know how to sprawl. You got to be strong enough to not be tossed on the ground. And it's going to be hard against someone who is so damn good at doing it. I mean, to say the least, the woman's a beast, man.
Yeah, but do you want to see that every time when she goes into a fight? That's going to be her main. I mean, what do we say about that with fighters? I mean, just like with Floyd Mayweather in boxing, people like the boxers they're too technical. People want to see the knockout. They want to see a brawler. So how is it different in mixed martial arts, and how is it different for mixed martial art female fighters in that regard with just one-dimensional fighting techniques? Now I don't know. We didn't see a slugfest. Maybe she would have done better, but she went in there and got her out of there. So and when we're looking for fighters, when they that's the other opponent's weaknesses. They can't deal with the fighter's elite style. Is that really the fighter's fault? And do the fans just become so aggravated that they don't want to even see that fighter or get excited about that fighter anymore, regardless if they're winning or not?
I think with Ronda Rousey, anytime you have a fighter who is exciting and that gets finishes quickly, they're a commodity. And that's always going to be preferred over a fighter, male or female, who just goes in there just to get a win. And I think certainly the one thing in MMA that you don't want to be labeled as is boring. That's the kiss of death. That killed John Fitch's career. Let's just be honest about it. I mean, that's ruined John Fitch's career. I mean, the guy's extremely talented. And for me, I don't think John Fitch is that boring, to be completely honest with you. But fans think he's boring. The UFC thinks he's boring. Fighters don't want to fight him because you're fighting a tough guy who, he's going to make you look bad. And his fights are not as exciting as fighting somebody else. That's the kiss of death. So with Ronda Rousey, at least if he could get killed, with Sarah Kaufman, certainly she's going to get more attention fighting her than fighting somebody who's extremely boring. So even if, fighting a person who has a loud personality and is somewhat dangerous, I think it's still a benefit because they are a star. And just to go back to your point, Will, about Ronda Rousey in that backstage interview, I just think she hates Hadi Andral, the backstage interviewer.
What's going on with that?
I don't know. They've always had tension. Even the Strikeforce event before, Ronda Rousey wanted to kill her. I thought she was going to armbar or something, man. I thought it was going to be another fight. It was going to be a doubleheader, man. I don't know what's going on, but she's always had it in for Heidi Andro. I have no idea why, but where do we go from here? In particular, with the Cyborg situation, Cyborg pretty much said that she won't cut to 135. Ronda Rousey says that she can make 135 if not using the steroids. Since Ronda says pretty much that since she's the champion, she has no obligation to move to Cyborg's weight class. And considering that Cyborg pretty much has no weight class anymore, since there's pretty much zero to no talent in that featherweight division, where does this go? I mean, there's so many different moving parts to make this fight even happen, let alone put it on pay-per-view. I mean, let alone even doing it, an Ultimate Fighter or doing a UFC one-off. I mean, what really happens next?
I think that if the money's right, I think Rousey would be willing to fight her. I don't think higher than or meet her at 145, but maybe a catch weight, and just it won't be for a title. It would just be to drive interest for women's MMA. But if the price is right for Cyborg, also, I mean, and she can make 135. I mean, we don't know how it would be without these alleged drugs in her system or the supposed ones. So I mean, that'd be really interesting to see. But what I think is if this fight were to be on pay-per-view, I think it would sell decently. It wouldn't do, earth-shattering numbers. It wouldn't do more than 300,000, I don't think.
Really? You think
No,
only 300,000? Even if UFC promoted this thing, if Ronda Rousey was on ESPN, only 300,000, really?
I think it'd be less than that, to be honest.
What? Really?
I think so, man.
Unbelievable.
For this to make, for women, for this cause, for this specific fight, that fight, and that's it. I mean, what are you going to promote
Cyborg
it with?
Rousey.
What? I mean, who would you put on the undercard?
It depends on. Okay, so all right, I'll answer that question first. If it was promoted by Strikeforce only,
Okay.
you have the bantamweight title first, and then you have Luke Rockhold on there, and maybe you do a triple title. I don't know, at least double. Either you put Gilbert Melendez or Luke Rockhold on there, but basically you're promoting the women as the main event. I mean, don't forget when Cyborg destroyed Gina Carano, they were talking about Cyborg on ESPN. Cyborg was getting a lot of attention as a women's MMA star. I mean, she was starting to get that. Okay, now Cyborg's the face of women's MMA, and people are willing to see her kill people. So now you have a person that's perceived as a killer against a person who's a Olympic medalist who armbars everybody. To me, I think since they're somewhat controversial, they got some mainstream appeal. This would be, on pay-per-view. It's the first women's MMA pay-per-view of value. Man, on Showtime pay-per-view, I'd be disappointed if it does less than 500,000.
And that's if they load up the card. If they
I don't even
all
think
their
so.
if they do it all, I mean, you'd have to have at least 3 belts up, I think, for this fight to make over 300,000. Or unless they did something crazy where they cross promote something where they have UFC guys and Strikeforce guys or girls on here. That's the only way I think it does it. I just don't think that they drive that much. She's everywhere. Obviously, we're seeing Ronda Rousey everywhere, but I don't think she has that much pull for just that fight to generate that many people.
It delivered on Showtime with the ratings.
But that, again, Showtime's what, $12 a month, man.
I mean, it delivered for its viewership. I mean, compared to a Spike TV, I mean, I can read the stats to you right now. The main event, it saw a bump to 676,000 viewers in less than a minute. I mean, those are huge ratings. I mean, it says those are the best ratings on 2012 for Strikeforce on that network. I mean, I just think, really, you don't have to charge full price for a Strikeforce pay-per-view.
That's right.
You could do it maybe at, $40, $30, a pop. I think it does fairly well, man. Even if, you know me, Strikeforce, has the most shallowest talent pool there is. So, It's not like I'm defending Strikeforce here, but I just think as a main event, I think it has some pull. I don't know. Maybe just
how much would this all have changed if Julie Kedzie would have beat Miesha Tate?
That's a good question.
She looked phenomenal. That's the best Julie Kedzie I've seen, and that's the best female standing up that I've seen in MMA in years. Her stand-up was just unbelievable, that fight.
I agree. Excuse me. I still think if Kedzie won, I still think they pretty much make her take another fight. I just don't think I don't think Strikeforce sees Julie Kedzie as a star they can push. Honestly, I don't know what the deal is with Marlis Kunin. I think if she won, I think maybe Kedzie versus Marlis Kunin. I think that still might even happen because Miesha Tate says she's taking a break from kind of MMA. I think I heard she's going to Brazil or Thailand or something to kind of get her skills more refined before she takes another fight. So I think with Kedzie, it's just so unfortunate. I want to talk about that fight in particular, particularly in the closing moments of that third round when she nailed that head kick. And then, she, apparently, according to Greg Jackson, she suffered a shoulder injury. I was just wondering why she didn't just keep the fight standing instead of going for the finish. It was just kind of a baffling decision, but nevertheless, a exciting conclusion. What did you think of the ending of that fight, Jorge?
I thought it was very interesting that she just didn't go out for the kill, and I thought even at the beginning, what was it, the first round when she, struck her with the straight right, I think, and just, Miesha Tate was dropped a couple of times, and I'm surprised that she did not. She has one hell of a chin, man. She got rocked, but still was able, to recover, and it just showed how, impeccably in shape Miesha Tate had trained for this, that she was to recover that quick. But for Julie not to finish it, I was surprised we didn't see, I guess, more hammer fist than we actually did, or any real desperation to end the fight. It just really surprised me.
Yeah, totally. Before we wrap it up, I want to talk about one more topic. Jorge, you got the pleasure of seeing Austin Trout and Carlos Condit train together, and I just want to talk about kind of the negatives and positives between, athletes from both sports training together. Usually we kind of, when we talk about MMA and boxing, we talk about the fans, but we really talk about kind of the bond that, both competitors share in having that common thread of competing against another man in a combat sport. So if you just go into detail as to, not give away any training secrets, of course, but just, how did they interact with each other? Did they know were they fans of each other? What was it like between Carlos Condit and Austin Trout?
Yeah, so that was actually the first time that they had ever met. I mean, you got the only world boxing medal champion here out of the state of New Mexico currently, and the only person, born and raised out of this state to, own a UFC title. So it was very interesting to see those two guys. Condit really was intrigued by the way Austin Trout boxes, just that loose, slick style. And we've seen Carlos fight, dozens of times, especially here in this area. And we know that he actually transitions from southpaw to orthodox constantly because he has power in both legs. So basically he just was studying Austin to see what he could learn from him, because Austin is a southpaw, to see how he can incorporate when he does decide to fight lefty in between fights. Obviously, it might not help him too much in this fight because, obviously, he's not going to be fighting a lefty, but still, it'll help him when he does transition between the two stances. But also, you had the guys talking to one another and just learning about the positions that one does stand. So basically, Carlos was just asking Austin Trout what specific moves he sees in a righty that he's able to time. So Condit would make a specific move that he would do in a fight, or that George St. Pierre typically does, and Austin Trout would show him and give him tips on how to actually counter it. It was amazing just to see the two guys in there just training together. They were supposed to have a training session, an actual sparring session, but I don't think it's really been reported anywhere. But Carlos Condit did suffer a cut about a week and a half ago under one of his eyes, just because he was wrestling. But the cut, seeing him the week before, just has healed tremendously. So, it should be ready by November. But to see two guys training that manner and just seeing their work ethic in two different sports at the top of their game in their primes. Condit's 28, I believe, and Trout's 26. It was just phenomenal to see two athletes, world champions, just training together. And what do you guys think about that cross training between the two sports? I think it can help, but it just really depends in the manner each fighter implements that style, because with MMA, you just have way too many things to worry about.
Right. That's my question in terms of, what it was Austin Trout offered in terms of advice in terms of improving his fighting style. Now, we heard in the past famous boxers like, Bernard Hopkins, who have changed his tune in terms of the respect for the type of training that mixed martial artists do. But in terms of what they could actually, the boxer can bring into the ring, what can they learn from the mixed martial artists in terms of improving, their fisticuff skills in the ring, besides a more intensified and rigorous type of training? I'm just kind of having trouble seeing what would be the benefit for the boxer.
And I don't know if there is much, unless the other guy's a world-class boxer himself. I mean, unless it's someone like, the Diaz brothers, who I think are very good boxers, or Anderson Silva, who knows what they're doing in there. It's just going to be a little different for, the MMA guy to be, teaching the boxer. But I think definitely, the MMA guy can benefit a lot more from the boxer, just because of that style that I don't think is all often used too much. I mean, you see guys like Koscheck and Pierre and the Diaz brothers do implement the boxing to it, and they're very successful with it too. So for these guys to be training, Austin really doesn't have a fight lined up. If it's just to get a workout, by all means, feel free to do so. But as you mentioned, Will, I think it might be the MMA guy that benefits a little bit more from that, obviously because of what they encounter, such different stances and different attacks that their opponent is coming with them at.
Well, maybe possibly the only thing I can maybe think of is maybe just the footwork. You know what I mean? Because that's something too. I mean, mixed martial arts fighters, they're setting themselves up, for footwork, for takedowns, for kicks. I mean, in terms of like certain type of feints would be beneficial, but I would probably have to stick to my guns in saying that the mixed martial arts is going to benefit more, from the boxer in the sense of just really perfecting their striking game. Because not unfortunately, I shouldn't say that, but a boxer's not going to be going for takedowns. He's not going to be throwing any type of kicks, no type of throws, no type of arm bars.
Unless you're Dawson, man, you've been throwing Bernard.
That's true. Yeah.
I mean, if you're willing to risk a couple of points, then yeah, you're good to go, man. But what can you do?
I think that's gonna wrap up our show, guys. Anything else you guys wanted to add before we head on out?
One more.
Yeah, just don't be cheating John Jones like the Neo Jack Johnson.
Oh. Wow. The race card. Well, go.
Hey, it's always about the race, man. I want to see. I'm just trying to. I mean, the fans are out there. Please respond. Why is this guy getting singled out like this? It's just it's beyond me. So we think of other sports fighters and how enraged they've had fight fans for specific reasons. This is not the first time fights have been canceled before. So what's the deal?
That's a very good point. And one thing that I'll be remiss without saying, that tomorrow night, Albuquerque's the top prospect and best boxer, Fidel Maldonado Jr. will be fighting on Showbox in the co-main event against Michael Perez. Both guys fought in the amateurs in the National Golden Gloves tournament. Mike Perez beat Fidel Maldonado. So it'd be very interesting to see. Fidel's 13-1. This other Michael Perez, he's 16-1. They're both signed with Golden Boy. This is a huge fight. I mean, people don't understand how big this fight is for the city of Albuquerque when it comes to prospects building from here. So make sure to check that out. That'll be on at 9 New Mexico time, so Mountain time, 11 out east. So make sure you guys check out that fight and see two prospects just go at it, because these guys have everything riding on this fight.
Where's that fight being held at?
Be on Showtime. It's going to be in Southern California in one of the casinos, Chico.
Gotcha. Okay, I think that's going to wrap up our first ever edition of the Low Blow Live. Again, as always, you can contact the show through Facebook.com/LowBlow Podcast, through Twitter through @TheLowBlow, and through email through lowblow505@gmail.com. We're available on the Stitcher app and on iTunes and on FightFansRadio.com. So pretty much any update concerning New Mexico or even national news, but especially local MMA or boxing news, check out our Facebook page or our Twitter feed. We just have, from opinions, from, actual stories. Please check that out. We're always active on those social media outlets.
Check us out on LowBlow 505.
Yes.
LowBlow 505. Tons of videos, tons of interviews with Strikeforce guys, UFC guys, professional boxers. Make sure to check that out.
Yes, exactly. Thank you, Jorge. I've totally forgot about that. YouTube.com/ youtube.com/LowBlow505 that has all the interviews Jorge's done this year. Like he said, Oscar De La Hoya is on there, Austin Trout, Greg Jackson. The list goes on, and it's updated consistently. Please hit the subscribe button, and you'll get those videos automatically. So please check that out, our YouTube page. So for Jorge Hernandez and Will McClary, I'm Justin Goodrum, and we'll see you next time. Have a good night.
Peace.
This has been the Low Blow on Fight Fans Radio, SouthwestFight.com, and USCombatSports.com.